My name is Morgan and I'm 27 years old. For as long as I can remember, my father looked at me like I was evidence of a crime he never stopped investigating. At family dinners in front of relatives, even at school events, he'd drop the same sentence like a verdict. She's not really mine. She's the affair child. Sometimes he softened it with sarcasm. Sometimes he sharpened it with rage. But the meaning never changed. He said I was too pretty to be his daughter, that my hair didn't match his, my eyes didn't belong in his family, and that for 28 years, almost my entire life, he had been certain my mother betrayed him. That belief became the background noise of my childhood. I learned to walk with it, eat with it, breathe with it. It followed me into every room, like a shadow that never let me forget who I was supposed to be. The mistake. My mom denied it every time. Quietly at first, then with tears, then with exhaustion. She'd say, "Morgan is yours." I never cheated. My father would laugh, cold and sharp, and tell her lies age badly. He told me not once but countless times that one day science would prove him right, that one day I'd know the truth about myself and hate my mother for it. I was 8 the first time he said it directly to my face. I remember sitting on the stairs, my feet not touching the floor, wondering how a father could sound so sure while breaking his child apart piece by piece. By the time I was a teenager, the label followed me everywhere. Aunts whispered. Cousins joked. "You don't even look like them." At 17, during an argument, my dad screamed it loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "You're not my daughter. You're the proof your mother ruined my life." That night, I packed a bag and slept at a friend's house, staring at the ceiling, asking myself the question I'd avoided my whole life. What if he's right? What if my entire identity was built on a lie? I tried to escape by being perfect. Perfect grades, perfect behavior, perfect silence, but nothing I did erased the doubt in his eyes. At my high school graduation, he refused to take a picture with me. At my college acceptance dinner, he raised a glass and joked that scholarships were probably easier to get when you weren't really part of the family. Everyone laughed awkwardly. I smiled because I didn't know how not to. When I turned 27, something in me snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to finally push me forward. I was tired of living in a question mark, tired of being called the affair child, tired of watching my mother shrink every time my father spoke. So I ordered a DNA test. I didn't tell anyone at first. I told myself it was just for peace of mind. But deep down, I wanted proof to shut him up, proof to give my mom back her dignity, proof to give myself a name that wasn't soaked in accusation. When the kit arrived, my hands were shaking. I remember staring at the swab, thinking about everything riding on that tiny piece of cotton. One result could end the war or confirm it. I sent it back and waited. Days stretched into weeks. My dad noticed I was quieter than usual and smirked, saying, "Nervous? Truth always comes out." My mom avoided my eyes, not because she was guilty, but because she was scared of losing me if the test said something different than what she'd sworn for decades. The email came on a Tuesday morning. I opened it alone in my apartment. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might throw up. I scanned the results once, then again, then a third time because my brain refused to accept what my eyes were reading. The DNA test didn't just prove my father wrong. It proved something no one had ever imagined. The man who raised me wasn't my biological father. And neither was my mother. I wasn't an affair child. I wasn't anyone's affair child. I wasn't their child at all. I sat on the floor, back against the couch, laughing and crying at the same time. For 28 years, my dad destroyed our family over a lie that wasn't even biologically possible. For 28 years, my mom defended a truth she didn't fully know. My entire life suddenly felt like a house built on the wrong foundation. Questions flooded in faster than I could process them. If they weren't my parents, then who was I? That night, I went to their house with the printed results in my bag. My father was already smug, already convinced he'd finally win. He said, "So? Ready to apologize to me?" I didn't answer. I just placed the papers on the table. He read them once, then twice. His face drained of color. The room went silent in a way that felt heavy, dangerous. My mother grabbed the papers, her hands shaking. whispering my name over and over like it was the only thing keeping her upright. My father stood up so fast his chair hit the wall. "That's impossible," he said. "She has to be yours." She has to be. But the results didn't change. The science didn't bend to his anger. For the first time in my life, the story he'd told himself for decades collapsed right in front of him. And that was the moment I realized the truth about my past was far bigger and far darker than any affair accusation. Because if I wasn't his child, and I wasn't my mother's either, then the real story didn't start with betrayal. It started somewhere else entirely. The silence after my father read those DNA results felt heavier than any insult he'd ever thrown at me. My mother sat down slowly, like her legs had forgotten how to hold her, staring at me as if seeing my face for the first time. My father kept repeating the same word, impossible, over and over, his voice cracking a little more each time. For 28 years, he had built his entire identity around being a betrayed man, a victim raising the affair child. Now the DNA test had proved them all wrong, and worse, it had ripped open a truth none of us were prepared for. I wasn't his child. I wasn't my mother's either. The room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in on. Decades of lies and half-truths. That night ended without answers. My father locked himself in the bedroom. My mother cried until there were no tears left. I drove home numb, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles hurt. Every memory of my childhood replayed in my head. The doctor visits, the baby photos, the stories about my birth. None of them made sense anymore. I barely slept. By morning, I knew one thing for sure. The truth wasn't finished with us yet. I called the hospital where I was born. At first, they were polite but distant, quoting privacy laws and old records. When I explained the DNA results, my voice shaking, something changed. They asked for my birth date, my mother's name, the attending doctor. Then they put me on hold. 10 minutes passed. 20. Finally, a woman came back on the line and said words I'll never forget. "There may have been an irregularity. You should come in." My parents and I flew out 2 days later. The tension on that plane was unbearable. My father didn't look at me once. My mother kept apologizing, even though she had no idea what she was apologizing for. At the hospital, we were led into a small office where an elderly nurse joined us. Her hands folded so tightly I could see the veins standing out. She looked at me with a strange mix of guilt and sadness before she spoke. She told us that 27 years ago, there had been a shift-change chaos in the maternity ward. 2 babies were born minutes apart. One of them was me. The other belonged to another family. Paperwork was rushed. Bracelets were misread. And just like that, 2 newborns were switched. She said they discovered the mistake weeks later. But by then, one family had already moved away, and the hospital chose silence over scandal. They buried the error. Lives went on. Mine went on. In the wrong arms. When the nurse finished, my father didn't sit down. He didn't yell. He just stood there staring at the floor, his chest rising and falling too fast. Then he collapsed. Doctors rushed in. Chaos exploded around us, but all I could hear was one sentence echoing in my head. My entire life was a mistake no one bothered to fix. After my father stabilized, everything changed, but not the way I expected. He didn't suddenly apologize or beg forgiveness. Instead, he withdrew, like a man realizing he'd wasted nearly 3 decades fighting the wrong enemy. My mother, on the other hand, broke down completely. She held me and sobbed, saying she'd failed me, that she should have fought harder, asked more questions, protected me better. I realized then that while my father's cruelty had been loud, my mother's guilt had been silent and just as heavy. The hospital helped locate my biological parents. Meeting them was surreal. They looked at me like a miracle and a ghost at the same time. They told me about the baby they lost, the daughter they never stopped thinking about, the child who disappeared from their lives without explanation. And suddenly, I understood something painful but freeing. None of this was my fault. Not my face. Not my existence. Not the accusations. Not the hatred. My father and I spoke one last time before I left. He admitted quietly that calling me the affair child had been easier than questioning himself, easier than accepting that he could be wrong. He didn't ask for forgiveness. Maybe he knew he didn't deserve it. Maybe he just didn't know how. I didn't hate him in that moment. I just felt tired. Today, I'm building a life based on truth, not suspicion. I'm learning who I am without a label stamped on my forehead by someone else's insecurity. I wasn't too pretty to be his daughter. I wasn't proof of betrayal. I was a child caught in a mistake, raised in a lie, and strong enough to survive it. If you stayed with my story until the end, thank you. Stories like mine are painful to tell but powerful to share. If you believe truth always finds its way out, and that healing starts with facing it, subscribe to the channel and support more real, emotional stories like this.